Hello, welcome. In episode 8 of Sales Enabled, I'm speaking with my good friend Robert Ruiz. Robert has held vice president roles at Groupon and WeWork, C-suite roles at Groupon Spain and at Taster. And in this conversation, we get into a topic that both of us hold close at heart, which is sales culture. Robert and I have similar attitudes on what a good sales culture looks like. And this has definitely changed over the past year or two as blitz scaling and hypergrowth companies find themselves right sizing to the current economy. In this episode, we discuss what career salespeople should be looking for and how they should be assessing the sales culture for their next role. What sales leaders can and should be doing to build a culture that balances high performance with psychological safety, and also what role training and enablement plays in a strong sales culture. Let's get into the show. Hey, Robert, great to see you. Super excited about this one. I've spoken on the topic of sales culture a few times, and it's no surprise I learned a lot of the stuff from you. So finally, good to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Hey, Dan. Thank you for having me. Very happy to be here with you.
Brilliant. Well, so the listeners know, we've gone back. Our relationship has multiple strengths, and just so people are listening to this and thinking these guys are friendly. We worked together. I worked for you at one point. Thank you very much for that. You also taught me how to be a parent, even though I had absolutely no idea what you were talking about at the time. So Robert coached me through us having a baby and going through that. And also, just to give you credit, so I love Audible and I love listening to Audible on 2x speed. You're the only person in the world that I don't need to listen to on 2x speed. Sorry, but everything you say is gold. Everything you say is gold. So this is going to be a good episode.
Thank you, Dan. Yes, it's true. I think you're the first person that I met when we joined WeWork. When I joined WeWork, that was on September 2018. It was you, actually. It was on King's Cross on sales training. That was my first day. I was excellent, actually. And you were just like 1 week old in the company also. And I felt like this guy has been here for 6 months or whatever. And he's like, no, I just started 2 weeks ago, something like that.
It was a fast learning ramp, right?
Yeah,
it was, but we had an amazing program there. I think, the work that we did putting into Sales Camp and the training that we did, the standard was high. But that's, we'll talk about standards today. Yes. Standards is one of those things that drives culture. If you've got a high standard, people joining. In fact, actually, we can talk a little bit about my dissertation. We'll go into that because that was all about standards and the culture that you join and how it impacts people. Because I saw some people come into previous companies where there was a bad culture. They'd be great salespeople and their performance would go down. Because if you come into a great culture, you almost get kind of pulled up. So yeah, that's the topic for today. The topic for around sales culture. But let's look at the market. And I know you're kind of very well plugged in. We went through the blitz scaling, went through the hyper growth, we went through the here's the billions, go and spend it. Doesn't matter on what. Don't think about on what you spend it on. And I think that ended in a way where we had to say goodbye to a lot of amazing people, and we're seeing that in the market right now, right? A lot of, especially salespeople, even though they're performing extremely well, just kind of finding themselves back out in the market through no fault of their own, but because we're having this right sizing of organization. So lots of great talent coming onto the market. If you are a salesperson now and you're thinking about your next move, what's the culture that people should be looking for? What do you think is it, and what makes up a good sales culture?
I think that's the key question. I think first, let me start by saying that I think what we're seeing right now is a rationalization, and we're going back to what it used to be. What we live on the last 10 years after the 2008 crisis was an influx of capital, and this is a typical dynamic that happens after every squeeze, there's a glut. And then on top of that, we had COVID. And when COVID and the lockdown happened, there was a lot of people suffering, but there was a lot of people working from home and saving money and moving towards online tools and systems and type of working. Like I always make the same joke. I used to have a beautiful desk where I used to work for 1 hour and a half at night pre-COVID. And after 2 weeks of pandemic, it just completely crumbled because it was beautiful, but it just couldn't hold 10 hours of me with my laptop every day. So we all refitted our houses to become online. So I think part of what's happening is that we're going back to a rationalization, and unfortunately, this is impacting a lot of people. A lot of us are impacted right now. So I think that in terms of what culture a salesperson need to be finding or looking for, I think like there's two components. One is the company's culture, and the other one is the team culture that comes and emanates from the leader. When we talk about companies, I think what we're going to see right now, we are seeing actually, even with all the layoffs, there are jobs on the markets, especially in the US and in the UK, but they're moving towards things that are more tangible. Like life sciences have been actually growing a lot in the last couple of years. Everything that has to do with green economy, everything that has to do with manufacturing. There's in the US a repatriation of the supply chain from Southeast Asia, and on the UK is happening also to a degree, a repatriation of the supply chain in order to adapt to the post-Brexit circumstances and the constraints that we are suffering here in the UK market. So I think it's trying to understand what is the culture of the company, if the company is actually cemented in a growth, but sustainable growth type of company, or if they're asking for crazy numbers. Like, for example, one telltale for me that is always very interesting is when somebody asks you, what are your contacts or what is your Rolodex looking like? It's like, dude, like the last 1-2 years, everybody, this has been musical chairs. First, because everybody was hired by everybody, and second, because now there's been layoffs. So my contacts are there. I have a lot of friends. You have a lot of friends now because we've been around the block, but probably they're not in the same place they were 6 months ago, and they will be in a different place in 6. So I think it's just trying to understand if the companies do understand that growing, there's no silver bullet. Like I think the conclusion to me, understanding what has happened in the last couple of years and what brought us to this situation is thinking that there's going to be a silver bullet that is going to save companies magically by signing with this person on a marketing campaign or doing or I don't know, buying this tool in order to do outreach and increase these magnificent 5x meetings that everybody's promising on LinkedIn. There's no such thing as that. So it's just one is trying to understand what is the company's culture, if they look at the P&L or not. Then in terms of the sales culture, sales is a very peculiar profession. And I'm saying profession, not job. There's a lot of people coming to sales, but they are tourists. Sales is very complicated. You become a professional salesperson where you've been up and down for 4 or 5 years. You've done very good and very bad, and then you decide, okay, I can cope with this, and this is what I'm going to be doing for the next 40 years. But that profession, you don't study that profession you don't have a university degree. You don't study economics, or you don't study whatever. So you need sales enablement professionals like you embedded in the company to actually help you become a better AE or SDR or even sales leader. I think like coaching for sales leaders is something that is fundamental, and it has changed my career. So if the team is embedded, it has embedded this culture of high performance, energy driven, but also enabling people to become better and grow within the team. That for me is the cornerstone of what makes a good sales team, because they can promise you a tremendously good OTE. The salary is not going to be good in the next 6 to 12 months because of the situation, and there's so many people unemployed that there's going to be a squeeze on the salaries. But the OTE can be amazing. But if the sales team actually is well ingrained within the company, if you feel that there's not a contrarian attitude, there's a good relationship with product, for example, with marketing and finance, I think those three teams are fundamental to be always very well aligned with product, marketing, and finance. And if there's a culture of growth internally that the leader actually is propositive about, that is some place where I think a person coming to sales will feel very comfortable or should be looking for. Why? Because that is going to help him or her build the next 3 to 4 years of their career, which is fundamental. Because if you start hopping between jobs between 22 and 27, you're going to learn only bad traits. You're going to be following the salary and the OTE, and that means that you're going to be burning a lot of bridges, and you're not going to be understanding the flows of victory and failure. Let's say that way.
Yeah, I think there's so many bits to unpack in that, and I think the growth at any cost thing, the model is it's fun. Like let's kind of just call it what it is. It's like a roller coaster. You ride it, you you're cashing the check before it's earned, like the billionaire check. We're all going to be rich. We're all going to be rich and famous. And sometimes it happens. Like some people get off of that, but maybe not. And I think this kind of sustainable growth thing that you talk about is a smart one. Salespeople, in my opinion, many of them are competitive.
Yeah.
And I think they still want to be in an organization that is growing, that is going in a direction, not just kind of treadmill style. So I think it's about finding one of those companies that is growing. Yeah. But like you say, it's growing with a controlled element. We've got a good client base. They're not just hoping for the one that's going to come along. And they're also not driving towards some magical exit where everybody just suddenly leaves and then things disappear. And you talked about this move to manufacturing and kind of more physical businesses. So I think that's really good advice.
Especially because context there is key. And there's a part that social media, Netflix, and all the media that we consume, they're selling us one dream. But that dream is the Silicon Valley, Palo Alto dream. The possibilities of making a big exit in Palo Alto or Silicon Valley or even New York are way higher than if you live in London or if you live in Newcastle or if you live in Frankfurt or if you live in Spain. I'm Spanish, and Spain is not a poor country, but it's not a rich country. The access to capital is way smaller than you have in the UK. So entrepreneurship in Spain is more complicated and is more focused on sustainable growth because you cannot fail big time because you're not going to have an ongoing influx of cash. The UK has access, specifically for the people that are listening to us from the UK, has way more access to cash than Spain and other countries, but it's not the US. And the exits and the multiples and the valuations on the UK rarely are the same thing as on the UK. So I think when we're selling this dream, and when we've been sold this dream about magical exits or whatever, we need to understand the context. If you are on a place like India that is going to be very competitive and demographically you can reach magnitudes incredible, or China or the US, you can land on your feet on one of those exits. On the UK, potentially, but less. And in the rest of the world, is good old-fashioned hard work, and maybe that exit doesn't buy you a mansion in Malibu, but gives you for the half a mortgage in your house, which is not a bad idea, actually.
Still not bad. Still not bad. So, okay, so the growth culture, but sustainable growth is the company. All right, and then, like you said, the team culture, I really like that. The alignment between sales, product, finance, everybody's shooting at the same thing. People aren't pulled in different directions from a priority perspective. If you're going into a sales interview, let's say I'm a salesperson, I come to you, what questions should I be asking as a salesperson? Like, because we're flipping it now, right? I'm interviewing you as a salesperson. I'm like, why should I join you? What questions should I be asking, like, to really understand the culture?
One of the things that I like to, and again, this is going to go to open-ended questions and everything that we do for a living here, which is how you need to be pitching these questions to actually understand how well your leader reacts. But it's like asking things like, who is your best friend in the company? Who is the team that actually, which one is the team that you speak the most or you expect me to talk about the most? What are the cross-functional relationships? How many times do we actually engage with product? Do we have people associated with us on the product team, product managers to actually do training or accompany us to meetings, especially on the SaaS and fintech that is very, very, very important and very big here in the UK. It's just trying to gauge indirectly what is the openness to other teams. And I know it sounds a little bit like very obvious, but it will surprise you the amount of people saying, no, I don't want you wasting time on meeting people from other departments. You're here to bang the phones and do 375,000 million calls per day and booking meetings and blah, 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 blah. But that's going to show you a little bit what is what. But making those questions and probing the person that is interviewing you about how do you interact with other departments and what are the expectations, that's fundamental, I would say.
I had an interesting conversation with a sales leader. She's an SDR manager just the other day, and we were talking about, she was struggling, right, because they were struggling to book appointments. And I said, so what are you doing? What's your hook? What are you calling up about? And it was pretty weak. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it was pretty weak. But I said, so what you need to do is you need to educate your client. Like, there's a gap in education, you need to educate your client before they'll be even willing to book a meeting with you. Mm-hmm. So I said, so what are product marketing doing for you? So I can't ask product marketing. They're too busy. They're not doing anything, like they're not aligned with us.
There you have it.
And I think that's the challenge, right? Every team is motivated or you can get to a situation where they're incentivized by different things, and so
Exactly.
unless they're all kind of pulling in the same direction, I think
Especially
that's a
because
good call.
I agree. We are seeing some very nice trends, or at least I find the trends very interesting on the last couple of years, where I come traditionally from a background of managing large sales teams, namely enterprise MLD type of teams, or then doing sales operations. Now that function is moving towards revenue operations, and I know it sounds funkier, but also there's a piece of theoretical approach there that I support, which is we used to rely on sales teams to bring revenue to the company, and that is not going to happen anymore. You cannot do that just by bombarding people and throwing bodies at problems and piling up salespeople. The only thing that's going to do is going to jeopardize is going to increase the SG&A of your company, and it's going to jeopardize the P&L of your company. What you need to do is come together as a company and cross-functionally, that's the function of the revenue ops team or the growth officers, to bring together things like growth marketing, as you were saying, and product and sales, and think about what is the virtuous circle that you can grow around that. When you have that in a company, then you see that company is going to be successful. If an SDR is a very tough profession. That's how I started doing sales, and it's not easy. If an SDR cannot reach product marketing to help with content, with cadences, with ideas, there's something deeper going on there.
Yeah, and too many times, like an SDR is thrown into the deep end, right? It's here's some resources, here's a tool, go and email 1 million people. Good luck. If you don't do it, by the way, we're not going to support you. You're out on your own. So yeah, SDR is one of the challenges. I have noticed though, and kind of going back to the blitz scaling, SDRs were also the ones that were paid. There were some crazy pay rises going on for SDRs, and so I think that facilitated the movement. People would be in a company 6 months. I saw this a lot. And then say, well, they're paying 50% extra, I'm going to go there, even if they're not very good. So, and I think that's, you talked about the glut, and you talked about all the kind of money coming back in. That promotes that kind of behavior, right? It becomes a bit more mercenary. And I think now we need to be thinking a little bit more differently. We need to think, like you said, 3 to 4 years along the line. I don't know if we can see beyond that, but at least find a place that can grow and nurture an individual so they can grow their profession, and I like the way you call it, profession, for at least a good period of time.
Yes, especially because unless there's a fundamental change in technology or hardware or something that happens that moves the dial, something like what happened in 2008 when post the crisis, we have the iPhone and then the app culture and social media, and that triggered another phase of growth until we identify what's going to be that next trigger to get over this hump. We are not going to see that influx of cash. Like cash right now is being very conservative. It's going back to real estate. It's going back to funds. It's going back to cash deposits. And that means that we all need to go to the good old-fashioned, proper value proposition based sales, which I feel very comfortable with, but it's going to require some adaptation, especially for the younger generations that have grown normalizing something that was not normal.
Yeah, and value proposition is one of the fundamentals of sales and sales training, right? I can't remember how many times I've done value proposition training. I did a video on it this week, right? Just a fundamental training. But it's one that we're just, I think we've got lazy at. It's just like, hey, you should buy our stuff because everybody else buys
it. I agree with you.
Oh, come on.
I think I love technology. I was a typical kid that I was playing with Macs when I was like 12 years old. But I think that technology has made us sloppy because of the access of the quick instant gratification that it gives us. And I know this is something that people talk about. For example, the same thing that happened on social media, where everybody just vomits the first thing that they think, without understanding what is the impact they can have on the person that is reading this, especially on mental health. This has happened also. All the access I have, for example, that I'm a sucker for Salesforce. I love Salesforce and HubSpot. I can spend hours there, and I really, really, really understand it. But one of the things that I realized, I don't know, some 7-8 years ago, it was making me a bad manager, because I was able to tell my boss upstream what was going wrong, but I was not able to tell him or her why it was going wrong, because I was not talking to my people. I was talking to Salesforce. I was doing queries on Salesforce, and I was doing reporting. And when you think about tools like some of the tools that we have right now for doing outreach and dial-in and CRMs is fantastic, like in comparison with what we used to have 10, 20 years ago. But also it has made us sloppy to understand, like, in the end, what is this one-to-one conversation with your prospect about value proposition? What is your need? How can I support you with that need? And what is the solution? Like, we've forgotten about that. We're just bombarding people and by brute force trying to crack the code. And this is what has gone wrong with that profession, I think.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, you've grown in that time, and yes, you're, of the people that I know, you are one of the Salesforce wizards. You're able to find the numbers that nobody's looking for, and people aren't even aware that they need to know these numbers. So, credit to you. And I think you have learned to communicate. So let's talk about communication. Let's talk about your communication. And I'm gonna ask you. I'm going to ask you a very loaded question,
Okay.
but the listeners won't get it. So you're clearly smart, right? You're talking about global economic movement. You're talking about how cash is available in different locations. You're talking about the trends in industry. So why do you write emails full of gifts? Why? Like, just for context, right? For context, Robert was sending his Monday, I think it was the Monday email, which is just a stream of gifts. And I love a gift. I think I've learned it, but are gifts appropriate business communication? Come on, man. Like, for a smart guy like you,
It has given me a lot of pain, especially upstream. Some people did not like it, and actually, with time, I split the messages and the audiences. Look, to me, it's very easy. Like, never mind how smart you are. If you cannot communicate appropriately, and to communicate appropriately, you need to think about the person that is receiving the message. One of the things that to me is super important on a sales team, like thinking about or recapping on what we've been discussing about this being a profession, but you don't have any academic background behind you supporting that. I come from environmental chemistry, so I've never worked on anything to do with that. It's just, how do you pass the message and how do you keep people focused on that? If I distill a lot of numbers and I prepare an email with 5 mini bullet points and then 2 paragraphs identifying what are the aims of the week, and I send it to my SVP or the C-suite, or they are gonna get it. It's something distilled. It's bits that they can repeat. Also, they can understand what are the 3 pain points. If I send to a mixed constituency of SDRs, AEs, CSMs, all those bits, they're not. It's just not gonna speak to them. It's not gonna transpire. You need something that is more focused, that is more brutal in the way, in the sense of more in your face. We have a problem. What is the problem that we have? When you're in a sales team, normally you have 2 problems: upper funnel or lower funnel. Upper funnel, you need to open more leads, you need to qualify better leads, or you need to progress the leads. Lower funnel, you need better conversion, better onboarding, better CPQ, or something like that. So in the end, you're managing 2 different stages, upper and lower funnel, and 3 main variables on each one of them. So 6 concepts. Okay. If I send an email to the SDR, says, guys, our upper funnel is down 25% week over week, and we are gonna have, with a conversion rate, we're not gonna hit quota. It's like jibber jabber. It's like, if I send a GIF saying, guys, we need each one of you 5 new leads per day this week to hit, and then we put a GIF of go get them or whatever, they are gonna get it, and it's fun for them, and it's not boring. If I send to the account manager, guys, the churn is getting out of whack and it's 2.5%, and this means X million of dollars mula that you're losing, they are gonna get it. So I think it's a question of how do we adapt the communication to them, and how do we make sure that they understand. When you manage a team, especially a team that is getting larger and larger, you need to be able to have this culture that we spoke, a few tenets, a few guidance, that every week when they arrive on Monday, they need to understand what is going on. What should I be doing this week? Do I go on the typical week that I arrive 8:45 to the office, I brew myself a coffee and then check emails? No. I need to open pipeline. I need to focus on opening pipeline the next 3 days, and then I need to do my admin on Thursday, and Friday I need to prepare the next week. Or I need to convert these 2-3 ops, and you need to give them some guidance to each one of the teams at the beginning of the week to fix the positions. And that will help a lot the team and the sales managers to actually drive the week. The difference, why that is important, having those crisp communications, is between you managing the week or the week managing you.
Yeah. Prioritization is the key one, right? And I think, I've got a list. I'm going to test you in a minute because, like any good interview, I'm going to go onto ChatGPT and say what are the topics we should be talking about. So I've actually got a list of 10 things that in a minute we'll see if you can get all 10 about creating a good sales culture and having those measurable, achievable goals. The targets for the week is such an important one, right? And I think we'll go back to SDRs. SDRs can get monotonous, right? You can get like doing the same thing over and over again. So I think actually giving them some variety, and even if it's just a shift in focus, targeting a different group or a different stage of the sales process. We're going to go kind of lower in the funnel, higher in the funnel, whatever. Like giving them something like that gives them a little bit more energy and a little bit more excitement. So I think that was one thing I've definitely learned from you on the communication pieces. You've got to have the numbers. Like you can't just go GIF. And then so if anybody's listening to this and just thinking it's just a string of GIFs, it's not.
It's goofy. Yeah. It's to make a good.
It's knowing that. Yeah, you've got to know the numbers, but you've got to have a point to make with the numbers.
Exactly.
And I think that's what the GIF brings to it.
To make a good email or to make a good PowerPoint presentation, you need to have crunched a lot of numbers on Excel and know your numbers upside down because you need to have substance. Like in the end, it cannot become a vanity project where you just send an email with GIFs just trying to be the cool guy. No, you're using this because this is your job. As a sales leader, you're there to set guidance for the week, the month, or the quarter, and you do this on a weekly basis. Then you do a wash up at the end of the month or at the end of the quarter, and you do a kickoff on the quarter or on the month to just reignite everybody. That's the job. The job is not buying beers on Thursday afternoon or going to a meeting just to show face with a client. The job is to set the teams in motion and to give them clear guidance of what do you need to be doing.
Yeah. And I think, adjusting it to your audience, you don't send that up, but you definitely send it down.
Exactly.
And I think, one of the things as well is to be consistent with that. This is, an element of consistency. I've seen, when it's easy, sales leaders do a lot of these things, right? And when things are going well, the GIFs are a little bit easier to write. But when it's difficult, when it's hard, like still write the GIFs. You can use different GIFs. You can still use different message, but the way you communicate has to be the same. And good sales leaders, I think, have that consistency where it means as a team member, you're not scared to go and talk to them because you don't know what mood they're going to be in. You know what I mean? It's like, this is a bad month. Can I go and ask them for some help? Or are they going to bite my head off? No, this is going to be the same as if it's a good month. Okay. So, all right, let's have a look then. So I'm gonna ask you to think about your own examples. Like, what have you done to set a good culture? And then I'll see if there's any on the list. But I've got 10 ways a sales leader can create a good sales culture. By the way, using artificial tools is not one of them, but you've got one already, which is the setting the measurable targets and goals for the week and the purpose. What else, when you're going through your mental checklist of sales culture, what are you trying to do as a leader?
One of the things that I force myself is like I color code my calendar. In red are meetings that I cannot avoid, green are regular meetings, and then yellow are meetings that I'm having with people from my team. And I'm always trying 50-55% of the time on every week to be with people from my team. And when 1 week veers away from that, unless it's something critical because we have a new product launch or the C-suite needs me somewhere else, I try to stick to my guns to that. I need to chat with the sales managers or the directors every week, and then I try to do a bi-weekly or a monthly, depending on the size of the teams, with each one of the reps. When we were in the office, I always did the same thing, which was I arrived early, especially before our kid was born. Now with the nursery and the school run is more complicated. But then I went one by one, chatting with everybody on the office, even if it's say good morning, how are you, just to show face and be with them, because there's so many things that you understand through that. When you see the same people over and over, you can understand just looking to them, like, this guy has not slept well, this lady feels that is worried. they start getting fidgety or happy, and you can start understanding those motions. But also, you just become a person that you're close to them. When you're close to them, that means that they can approach you, as you were saying before, to make you questions or to ask you for support. Because if you meet with them every 2-3 months, like, hey, Dan, what can I do for you? Congratulations on your good quarter. Just lip service. I didn't need you when I smashed my quota. I need you when it was like 7 p.m. at night. I have nothing on my pipeline, and I was with this gut-wrenching feeling that I was not going to hit target and I was going to get a performance review. I feel like you need to create these habits of making yourself available. And for some people, this is complicated because they have this view that as a sales leader, you need to be detached. And again, this profession is different. You need to understand that you're dealing with people and with human emotions. If you train your team to be robots, they're going to be pitching to your clients like robots. And that means that their conversion is going to be very bad unless your product is extremely good. If you have an extremely good product, you can become picky. If not, you need to develop relationship with your team so they get used to develop relationship with their prospects, with their champions, and that's how they're going to be able to sell. So I think like one of the things, setting on my calendar time to be with them, forcing my time to be with them, have impromptu conversations. I think that when you have this feedback relationship, you can say brutally honest things in a kind way. I think there's a difference between being kind and being nice. Nice is always say, yeah, everything is going to be all right. Kind is like, no, man, you are making a mistake here. You need to change here. And I'm saying this to you. This is a kindness. It's my job, and your job is to listen to me. When you create this relationship, when you have these ongoing coaching situations between you and the directors and the sales managers and the reps, that happens. I think like another point that is fundamental there is being super aligned with the sales managers and the directors and be their allies. Because if you have the VP, in that sense, like the roles that I've been doing, mostly going straight away to the reps directly, the sales managers and the directors can feel that they are bypassed. So you need to be their ally and on the one-to-ones, debrief with them. Who are the reps that are concerning you the most? Who is at flight risk? Who is at risk of actually not hitting quota? Why? Why yes? Why not? What's the strategy? Are you going to be the good cop and I'm going to be the bad cop? How do we do it? Do we take this person for lunch? Do we take him for a cup of tea? Strategize that with the directors and the sales managers. That also gives everybody the feeling that truthfully you are a team. You're a high-performing team, that you come together with the same ideas, and that you can build together a culture of respect and transparency, and people can open up. So in that way, your direct reports will not feel that you're stepping over their toes, but also you are an ally. And that's fundamental, because the sales manager role is a pretty ungrateful one sometimes.
Sales managers get a lot of stick, man. They get a lot of work from kind of down and up. It's finding time. Actually, one of the things that I hear from them a lot at the moment is finding time to do all of those things is a challenge. So, color coding, blocking out the calendar, making sure you're spending time and building relationships before you need them. Right?
Yes, exactly.
That was one of the things that you did very well, and you continue to. And that actually allows you to shortcut communication later, right? And I think it makes the gifts, because I've connected with you. You understand what I'm trying to say when I'm trying to say things, even if it's in a slightly quicker motion. All right, cool. So the relationships are important. What else? What else goes into a good culture? You talked about training, this is our relationship. Let's talk about training. What's your views on training, enablement? How do you see it?
Training and enablement is one of the things that we in general on the profession did not get absolutely correct on giving it its importance, and I think that's why to me it was so important always to be very engaged with you and your teams when we were in the old place and in every training team. And to me, actually, that's one of the things that I ask about enablement and training when I'm interviewing for a role, or somebody approaches me, or I'm approaching somebody for a role. And what is the approach to enablement? Why is this so important? You spoke about the sales managers. We're expecting the sales managers to manage the team, to train, sometimes to even player coaches. That's metaphysically impossible. So training, it has become, or the sales enablement and sales training in many companies, a ticking boxes exercise, onboarding practice. And training should never be an onboarding practice. Let me make a question. This is going to be very extreme, and when I say this, some people look at me like I'm cuckoo, and maybe I'm cuckoo. But if you have a team of physicists and you're working on nuclear reactors or whatever, that is going to make billions of pounds of output, you're not going to give them an online training or a course in Coursera, which may be amazing, and expect them to actually train themselves like that. You're going to do probably every quarter a roundup with them. You're going to go send them to seminars. You're going to send them to conferences, yada, 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 because it's a very specific skill set that you need. We're talking about physicists right now, and you were talking with Andrea the other day on the podcast about baseball players and rugby players. The sales team is exactly the same thing, in the sense that it's ongoing. I think training and enablement, they should be the right-hand person of the sales leader. If a sales leader doesn't have a sales enablement person, or if maybe the team is very small and the company is very small, but they need to have the ambition to create a sales enablement platform and team. Why? We talk a lot about go-to-market. It's one of the buzzwords right now. Everybody wants to do go-to-market, and I feel that it's a little bit of a wishy-washy approach. Go-to-market, the first thing you need to do when you do go-to-market is you need to segment your audiences. You need to understand what is your total addressable market, which part of that market is composed of enterprise, MLBs, SMBs, how they purchase, where they are, how they buy. There's a lot of data doing that. But that's going to give you 3, 4, 5, 6 buckets, and you're going to prioritize the buckets that actually match to your product market fit. That's the key thing on how you do a go-to-market strategy. You have a product market fit, or you develop a product market fit, and then you tailor to your audiences. Now, if you are lucky, you're going to have 2 or 3 audiences. But that means that if you aspire to sell to each one of those audiences in the same way, you're going to make a huge mistake, because you are going to be talking only to at least one of them. And you should try to aspire to build a narrative for each one of them and have different adaptations of the product market fit. That is metaphysically impossible to be done by the VP or director or the sales manager, because day to day they have a lot of things to do. That's why you need a team of people that are trained and academically prepared and with the right experience, like sales enablement professionals, to distill that information, align with the VP and the directors on who and when do we do these enablement sessions. And that should be an ongoing process. This should be an ongoing process, certification, training, and retraining. And when you have a conversation with a rep, so like, you are not going to get promoted ever to sales manager if the sales enablement person tells me that you're not ready. You and I have had this conversation with some people. That completely changes. That doesn't mean that this person is going to be in a seminar with you or checking materials, documents on a platform, thinking like, okay, another exercise. No, I need this to become better. I think, like, to me, training and enablement is fundamental just because of that. You cannot address all your audiences in the right way without tailoring your pitch and tailoring your approach. Look, on the place where you and I met, it was a catch-all party. We were selling to absolutely everybody. But you think we have at least 3 business on the sales team, and that was why it was so important to have you and your team there. We have an SMB team, we have an MLB team, and we have an enterprise team. And those 3 cultures were fundamentally different. The SMB team, they were selling to small occupiers and to small companies, community. Then the MLB, mid-sized companies, 200, 300 people, very self-contained, everything. And then you have enterprises that actually are over-exploring across the world. Each one of them have completely three different approaches to buy. Some are more product-based, other pricing-based, other one security. So then in the end, what we did, if you remember, each one of the 3 teams, the one that was doing SMBs, we took a lot of professionals coming from, for example, the gym industry, and we were doing gym and hospitality. They were doing touring. They were creating a special feeling, because that is those teams were actually indexing on good space, functional space, but then experience that is going to help me attract and retain talent. The MLB and the mid-market teams, they needed convenience. They needed something where they can show muscle to their investors, but also comfort to their employees. So it was very much aligned to the brokerage business, that we have a lot of transactional people there. And then the enterprise business, we took the approach of a typical SaaS medic approach, because you build a relationship in time, and you start with a small office here and then a larger office there, and then you find that you're selling 10,000 people office that is worth millions of dollars somewhere else. So you have those 3 different audiences, you want to capture each one of them because your business allows you to do that. You need to prepare 3 different value propositions, 3 different teams, and you need a team to facilitate that, which was the mission of your team. And that's why you guys were so successful, because we managed to actually impact those 3 audiences in a very positive way and rebalance a company that was 85% SMB to a company that was literally 30. And that gave the company a lot of solidity. That is one of the reasons why sales enablement is so fundamental. And when a company doesn't take enablement seriously, to me, that's a big red flag, because they don't think about audiences as something that is dynamic, that is going to change. If you're expecting to have the same playbooks and the same pitch over and over and over again and don't change, you're going to fail. And the people that have been pitching in the same way for the last 3-4 years, going back to how we initiated the conversation today, now they are lost, because the sales pitch that they were using is worth nothing. When you're reducing your tech stack, when everything is about how actually are the tools utilized, what is the output of the tools, yada yada yada, it just becomes a completely moot narrative, because we used to have a lot of tools in your tech stack, and there was a pressure to actually have more. Like, our investors told us that they're investing on this other tool, which is going to be the next big thing. Roberto, you need to go and, like, I don't care what's the price, license it.
Yeah. No, I don't want to. Everyone's stripping tech stack out now, right? And hopefully we're going back to a more conversational method of sales, and actually persuading people, like you said, with value proposition. One of the questions, and actually I'd be keen to get your take just quickly on this one, is sales enablement, sales training, and you did an amazing job. And I just want to say thank you for literally pulling us into that space, because we were kind of getting edged out a little. But you pulled us into that space. One of the questions that sales enablement professionals are asking all the time is, how do we get a spot at the table? What's your advice? Because, there's differing levels of sales training and enablement out there. No pointing our fingers. But what would be your advice if we want to get a seat at the table? If we want to be there to help influence direction, what do we need to do as an industry?
You and I spoke about this a lot back in those days. What is the value that you guys are adding? And that means that you need to have numbers, which you were always very good to. And there's a lot of amazing tools right now in the enablement space that can give you proper metrics. You were chatting about that on one of the podcasts recently, about what is the increase on conversion rate and everything after a sales rate. So you need to have those numbers. But then also you need to build those relationships. And this part is wishy-washy. Bear with me. One of the mistakes that I think that we've done on sales is that, especially in the last 10 years, we've been very heavy-handed with the rest of the teams. So I look down on finance, I look down on these teams, and whatever, we're going to spend a lot and this, and we're going to do President's Club, and we're going to send people to, to Acapulco for 15 days on the company's dime. And then you have the person that is paying the invoices on finance say, like, these guys make a lot of money on the bonus, and now we send them there, and they have all these fancy tools. What do you think is going to happen when you don't look to the eye of these guys, when you actually don't explain to these guys why do you need to be doing these things, what is the output, and how does help them do their job? What do you think is going to happen when these people that are feeling disgruntled, let's say that way, now have the power to actually squeeze the budgets? Because now is the moment where the CFOs and the finance teams, like, they're going to tell you, they're going to show you the middle finger, and they're going to tell you, you never care about me, I don't understand why you're doing that, I'm not going to pay you to go on a vanity trip to the beach. So I think one of the things that sales leaders and sales enablement leaders need to be doing is weave those internal relationships on understanding what is the value. Like, the companies where training and the place where you and I were together, we did have that with some of the leaders. One of the problems that we had is that when that cohort of leaders left, the leaders that were coming from behind from underneath the ranks, they didn't have that approach from us, and they were just saying, like, you're spending a ton of money on this and that, and I don't see the value. You just want to go on the company's dime to the piece with your folks. Like, well, no, it's not like that. Like, if I need to retain this person, I need to do this and this and this, and training and yada. So I think, like, creating this over communication internally of why enablement is so important. Like, nobody is so stupid as to reduce training on hazard and security, for example. Right now, nobody is silly enough to do that. They need to understand that not training people, not having an enablement department, is the same thing, because they are going to leave, or they're not going to perform. The good ones will leave and the bad ones will stay. And the result of that will be misery because you are not going to be able to hit your targets. So enablement is a team that turbocharges the company revenues. So what you guys need to be doing is, one, get to know your numbers, and second, evangelize. You need to be all over the place, seeking that time. And maybe you cannot go to the VP of finance from the beginning, but you can start with the senior manager and then with the senior director. And finance teams have something that is very interesting. They normally are very transparent with each other because they speak the same lingo. And if you've been ever in a finance internal meeting, they speak like peers to a degree in many cases. And the CFO and the VPs want to know what is happening on the ranks, so they listen to them. So if the head of commercial finance or the senior manager of finance that is doing with accounting, like, I spoke with Dan and with enablement team, and actually they're doing this and this, those things, that's how you create, you build your identity within those teams that are deciding, because then there's going to be the conflict of why is this different from HR and talent? What's the difference? Why do we need to have a sales enablement team that is not what HR or the people team are doing in terms of training us on this or that or whatever? Is fundamental because it's a completely different profession. You don't have an academic background. You have a moving target. You have moving constituencies. You have product developments. You need to be your finger should be on the pulse every single day. Enablement is a 24/7, 365 days a year activity. You cannot wait for the quarterly training platform. That's why you need a sales enablement team. But to put it in value, you need to build those relationships.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, it's one of the things that I've tried to do, since working with you is always tied to the numbers. Like I'm a little bit militant on that now, and anybody who works with me just hates the fact that I'm banging on about the data. But we need to have the data, right? I think that's important. We can't take full credit. We can't always take full credit because there's often other initiatives going around the project. But it's good sales leaders that recognize there's a people component to it as well as a structure or an incentive component. That's kind of what works. And so there is two elements. And I think the other thing as well, building those relationships and then sharing theories. This is one of the questions that someone asked, and I answered it this way. As I said, you should never go to those meetings asking what is needed. You should go with a hypothesis. And the hypothesis is, here's the number that we need to impact. Here's the potential behavioral skill that is the challenge that we're seeing. And this is the potential fix or potential fixes. So I think that's it. So knowing your numbers, knowing the people, helping them understand the value of enablement, and then actually going with some specific projects where you can add some value. So really interesting.
It has to do with the growth mentality, and this is something that, for example, is one of the things that when you're interviewing for a company, you can start asking the person that is interviewing you about this approach. What I mean by this is, to me, it's very important understanding what is the finance team's approach to growth. For example, do you have a CFO that is focused on sustainable growth, or do you have a CFO that is more traditionally focused on accounting? Do they care about attribution, or do they care about incrementality? What is the approach from the people team? Like, for example, on a place previous to where you and I met, we used to have a chief people officer that I was absolutely delighted to work with her, because she came to absolutely every WBR meeting, every weekly business review, and every monthly business review for each one of the countries, and there were a lot of countries. She was always taking notes. She was always silent. If she didn't understand something, she followed up after the meeting and asked you. But then when push came to shove and you needed to define something, a restructuring or a new product development or promotions, she absolutely knew the job of that sales team in particular upside down. What was the output? You didn't need to do any briefing. You didn't explain if the SDRs were hitting target or not. She knew it. She knew and her whole team understood that. And I was having a coaching session with her. One she was coaching me because I was in the middle of my career progression within that company, and I told her that I praised that. And she basically told me that she embraced growth mentality, and she didn't want to be the person, something very similar to what you just said. She didn't want to be the person that needs to ask what needs to be done. I need to know, that's my job, what needs to be done, and I need to be propositive. But for that, I need to understand what you guys are doing. So it's not a passive spectator, it's a participant in this growth mentality of the company.
Yeah. And I like it when the people team and sales team, there's often like people so many times point fingers. It's not. We're all one big organization. Don't point. All right, let's jump to this list. I'm going to see. I think we've got most of them, So 10 ways. So define, communicate the company's sales mission, vision, and values. That was always one. I think is you talked about the different tiers of business and what we're trying to go for. I think that was good. Set clear, measurable goals. Yeah. Celebrate and recognize the successes of the sales teams. You did that brilliantly. Helping just even raise the profile of even the earliest SDR for the work that they've done and recognizing outstanding performance. Training and development there. Encourage collaboration. You're doing all right, top 5. Do you think you're going to get all 10? You're looking pretty confident.
Hey, I'll be very happy to learn also more things today. I've been learning a lot, so bring it on.
So here's one. Yeah. Transparent, open communication. We talked about communication. One of the things that you used to do was the donut meetings, right? And when I first saw the invite to the donut meeting, I was like, oh no, this is for people who've got 0 in a month or something like that. And then I rocked up just to see what I could learn, and there were physical donuts on the table. That was one of those things. Like, what was your intention with those donut meetings? Because it had everyone from every team.
Yes. So one of the issues that we had in that company and happens in companies that go through a blitzscale or a hypergrowth phase, we have a lot of new people coming from different walk of life. So if you remember, we have different business there. Like we spoke about the sales team, that we have 3 different audiences, but then you need to chat with product and with construction and there's a lot of different people coming from different walks of life. They have very different interests. So part of the issues that we had when we wanted to roll out a project and happened to everybody is that we were speaking different languages, even if it was English or French or Spanish or Mandarin, we were speaking different languages because we indexed on different things, relationships, numbers, projects, different things. So there was always the conundrum of, I need these guys to understand how are we doing from a revenue perspective, because that was my job, and I need them to help me open this building faster, lease this building faster, reduce the cost here. So I need to have numbers on one side, but then on the other side, I need to bring these guys together around the process and the systems, because one of the things, we spoke about numbers, we spoke about people, but the third part of this trifecta for a hyper growth is systems and processes. You need to build systems that are scalable, repeatable, that they just go by default. What McDonald's are doing. McDonald's are phenomenal because they have systems and processes that are so ingrained that everybody knows after 1 month what happens in every possible situation. And that is very comforting for them because they can grow faster. So we need to build those relationships and those systems and processes. So the idea was, if you remember, it was Friday to finalize the week. 1 week, we go around the horn and we talk about numbers. What are we seeing? What are you seeing where I'm hurting you? What am I seeing where I'm hurting you? But then if you do that every week, it just becomes a pain. But also you don't weave those relationships. So it's like, okay, let's trash the numbers and forbid numbers for 2 weeks every month. So we do 2 weeks of numbers and then 2 weeks to talk. We're going to talk. But then the typical situation is like, okay, you gather, it's like 14 to 20 people sometimes there. They come from
big meetings,
directors, senior managers, associates, 1 hour in a meeting room. Okay, let's talk. Let's talk about what? And that's very complicated. So one of the biggest or the best icebreakers that I know always is food. I like food. I'm Spanish. I think that food helps bring people together. So let's bring some donuts. So we can start with jokes. Oh, I'm on a diet or this, or do you have vegans? I want chocolate. You start talking about that. And then people just relax after 5 minutes where you have crumbs all over your face and everybody's having their cup of tea. Then we start dropping topics. Okay, what did you see this week? And then people start coming to you. Hey, on Friday meeting, I want to talk about this thing, this process or this system or this tech tool or whatever. And then you bring them on and then you create this in a very, it just flows in a very organic way. So what helps is, one, you build relationships and you understand that that person in front of you is your peer, not your contrarian. You should go to him or to her for support if you need it. But also, when you need to deliver bad news or tough news about numbers, hey, I'm going to fail on my target because you are not delivering this project on time, they understand why is the reason, and you just build those systems and processes. And that's what we're discussing on the donut meeting. What is going on here? Why cannot we open on time? Okay, I have this limitation. Okay, and it normally flow this way. Hey, I cannot tour for 3 weeks. If I cannot tour for 3 weeks, my pipeline is stuck. So actually, it's gonna take me 6 more weeks to actually achieve my revenue target at launch date. Okay, I need to stop. I need to stop here you from touring because I need to do this and this and this. What about if I do this meanwhile you are on the process of warming up leads instead of touring? Okay, happy days. And we changed something very stupid, which is a calendar, something that it didn't mind when that team did it. It needed to happen in the first 3 months. But actually, if they move it 3 weeks before, it just completely clears the schedule for our teams to tour that specific building. And that could only happen in a very relaxed environment where people can open and talk about why is this hurting. If not, the possibly what could have happened is that somebody will send an angry email, I cannot do this and that, and your team is hurting our quota, and I'm going to escalate this. And then somebody will answer, oh, well, you are not respecting my team. And then everything will become lizard brain and lizard brain fighting each other instead of two human individuals talking to each other and understanding how can we work together. That was the aim of the donut meeting. You have a team so different from different walk of lives with missions that sometimes are so opposite that you need to bring them together and create these spaces when they can collaborate. And matrix organizations are a royal pain in the bum, but I think it's the best thing that can happen when you have a matrix organization and flows. It's wonderful because everybody learns and everybody is aligned on the mission. When you have hierarchically separated organizations, they don't talk to each other, and then you have silos and there's no transparency, and that's just misery there. I love matrix organizations, but matrix demand from leaders huge effort to foster communication.
Yeah, I love that. And if you send an email that says, hey, why can't you do this? Like, it's going to get received in one way. But if you've got a mouthful of donut and you know the person and you say, hey, why can't you do this? It just lands differently. It's not offensive, and they're like, well, actually, yeah, maybe I could. And it's so. I think you've talked about 3 things. You've talked about company culture, in terms of sustainable growth, longevity. You talked about team culture, with the leader setting the culture. But you're also talking about these micro cultures and actually being intentional around how you create meetings and what you're trying to do with that. So I like that you're operating on all those levels. So yeah, definitely got the culture of trust and respect, inclusive environment, encourage innovation. You were definitely getting people to go out and try new things. That was brilliant. And then that, continuous improvement by encouraging feedback, listening to suggestions. It's about being open, hearing things as much as possible. And like you said, walking around the team again. It's no team, just like having that permission then to later on for them to open up and say, hey, you know what, actually this is happening.
Exactly.
And by building that. So, well done. 10 out of 10. I would have expected nothing less, but we are ultimately trusting ChatGPT, which is...
let me tell you one thing. Until ChatGPT and AI is not sentient, which is not, any answer is as good as the person making the question. So congratulations in order to you.
Well, thank you very much. I think this is a huge topic. Mm-hmm. Sales culture is, like I said, people are evaluating companies now based on the next 3 to 4 years, and it's joining a company that is worth investing in. Like life energy is limited. I can't remember how many weeks it is, but you've got all those charts, like something like 40,000 weeks. It might be completely off. Let's invest those wisely. Let's invest it into an organization that values us. Let's do good work as a professional. If you're transitory, then carry on. But if you're a sales professional, then go and figure out the best next move.
Look,
Robert, this has been awesome. Yeah.
Likewise, Dan. Look, I think just as a coda to this, there's no magic formula here. But to me, in my experience, and speaking to the people that will be listening to you, starting with the question or going back to the question you started of what to look for, like the best decisions that I've taken in life, professionally and personally, are when something is around a project that makes me tick. When I've taken decisions based on short-term gain of title or salary, I failed miserably. And
Yeah.
and that's a lesson that we tend to forget here and there. And it happened to me on my early stages of my career, and it's happening to me now, which I think is a good reminder to have some humble pie. So if you are looking at what should be the next company that you should be, my only thing to you, dear listener, that I will tell you is like, think about what is the project, and think if you want to see yourself there in 3 years. And think about what are you sacrificing if you just choose something with a funkier title and maybe a couple of thousand quid more, which I know are very important for everybody because we all need to pay bills. But what are you sacrificing in terms of learning and developing if you don't do that?
Yeah, it's the all-round thing, right? It's the
Yes.
all-round. It's the all-round. Amazing. Robert, where can people find out more about you? Are you active on social, LinkedIn? Where's the best place to connect?
I think LinkedIn, everybody can find me, Robert Taracido Ruiz. I think my family
I'll
name...
put that in the show notes.
You put it in the show notes because my family name is pretty complicated, pretty Spanish. I don't have social. But yeah, on LinkedIn, I'm always happy to have a chat with anyone.
Yeah, so reach out to Robert if you want to know more about sales leadership, sales culture, or if you're expecting your first baby and you want some rapid fire advice. He's also phenomenal at that. Robert, thank you again. It's been a pleasure. I'll see you soon.
Thank you, Dan. See you soon.
You know what I think, Ron? I think that was a sales call. Good job, buddy.
So you're going to buy a subscription?
No, I already get the Times.
Bye-bye.